Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Insight APSAD webinar. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we're meeting today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to extend that welcome and respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders that might be joining us in the room or on webinar land. So thank you and welcome. My name's Jim Hunt. I'm one of the nurse educators here at Insight. And it's quite an important week this week with National Suicide Prevention Day yesterday and Are You OK Day coming up on Thursday or Friday this week. So it just shows that mental health is an important aspect this week. And it's quite alarming in Australia because although globally suicide rates are slowly reducing, in Australia, alarmingly, they're actually on the increase, and particularly amongst young males. And we know that a lot of the issues that lead to this stem from childhood trauma. So it gives me great pleasure today to welcome Ruby Awram, who has a history and a background, I should say, as an OT, but is working with an organisation for emerging minds, which is focused on the mental health, social and emotional wellbeing of children. So please welcome Ruby Awram. Thank you.
Good morning. So today I'm going to present on why it's important for all practitioners to respond to issues around substance use in a child-focused way. And I'll address this by looking at what the issue is, so the effects of parental substance use on children, and identify an opportunity to use a proactive and preventative approach, whether you're a professional working in the AOD sector or in generalist services that support adults. Then I'm going to introduce how the National Workforce Centre for Child Mental Health can support your work with parent clients using a suite of resources, including a new short, semi-structured, evidence-informed psychosocial discussion tool. First, I'd also like to recognise the land on which we meet today and pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, their ancestors, the elders past, present and future from the different First Nations across this country. And also acknowledge the connection of land, culture, spirituality, ancestry, family and community for the wellbeing of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and their families. So a significant proportion of people who use substances and access specialist and generalist services are parents. Adult services are really well placed to make a positive difference in children's lives, whether or not the child is present in our contact with parents. However, it can be easily missed. Unfortunately, it's easy to overlook the impact that parental adversity, such as substance use, has on children, essentially making them invisible to adult services. So working in a child-focused way can help to break these intergenerational patterns of substance use and also buffer children from the impacts of parental AOD use. There's an increasing call for adult services, such as AOD services, to play a role and incorporate the needs of children and families. The National Framework for Protecting Australia's Children states really clearly that child wellbeing and protection is everybody's business, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that. But it states that all services, whether they're traditionally focused on the adult or the child, need to work together to reduce the impact of vulnerabilities on children and strengthen those factors that we know enhance the well-being of children and families to achieve outcomes. So the AOD sector supports this too. For instance, in 2018, a commitment to child and family responsive practice and treatment models was made at the AOD Sector Convention in Queensland. And further, the National AOD Workforce Development Strategy also cites child and family sensitive practice as a key outcome for developing an innovative and capable workforce. Parents also talk about this. They also say that they want to reduce substance use or stop altogether because of the impacts on their children, and I'm sure you've worked with families in this situation. Many parents state that they want what's best for their children, and we know that children can be a big motivator for change. So when is it a problem? Well, many parents use substances regularly with no major consequences. However, when people start to lose control over their substance use, we know that this impacts different areas of a person's life. So when parental substance use poses risks to children, it doesn't mean that parents cannot care for their children, and not all children will be negatively affected by their parents' use, and many parents have developed strategies to minimise the effects on their children. However, when use does become problematic, it can result in behavioural, cognitive and emotional problems for children in the immediate sense, but also in the longer term across their lifespan. So it can affect children negatively from the point of conception all the way into adulthood. And these impacts on children do depend on multiple factors. So of the children who are negatively affected, not all will be affected in the same way. So I'm going to run through some of these effects. Parent functioning can be affected differently depending on duration of use or the nature of use, whether it's episodic or chronic, the level of use and the type of substances. So for instance, we know that depressants are obviously going to have a different effect to stimulants on parent functioning. Where substance use is present, many parents cycle between the periods of being well and unwell. And I guess when this is frequent or unpredictable, disruptions to children's daily lives, these can pile up and they can really increase the chances of interruptions to development. So when we consider child development, the younger the child, the more profound the impact of adversity, any adversity. Studies show that substance use in pregnancy can cause a number of harms to the developing child, depending on the substance use, such as low birth weight, breathing difficulties, substance dependence, withdrawals at birth, as well as lifelong effects such as fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. Younger children, particularly infants and toddlers, can be more vulnerable to issues impacting upon parents, as they're more dependent on parents to meet their needs, and they're actually less likely to have other supportive adults in their lives, other support systems that protect them. Substance use can reduce the parent's emotional availability for the child and affect their bonding in these early years and attachment, and ultimately the parent-child relationship. Older children may sometimes take on more responsibility, which can affect their schooling, their friendships and their sense of identity. School attendance and educational attainment can be affected, and some children withdraw into themselves and feel ashamed about their parents' substance use. Others might act out and they may experience problems at school because of this. In the most extreme circumstances, I think it's important to acknowledge substance use has been identified as a key risk factor for issues around child abuse and neglect. This isn't the case for all families, and it can leave children exposed to abuse and witnessing inappropriate behaviour or being left unsupervised or in unsafe situations. There's other risk factors. So we know that parental substance use coexists with complex issues such as mental health problems, trauma, insecure housing, family and domestic violence, financial problems or poverty, intergenerational disadvantage as well. These issues can compound the effects of substance use on the developing child and their family, and it can lead to things like social exclusion and isolation. Another factor to consider, we know that having another parent is very protective of children. However, if both parents are unwell or a parent is isolated, children's vulnerability can increase due to the absence of having another supportive adult who can nurture and maintain those childhood routines. If both parents are experiencing adversity, family relationships are often placed under much greater strain as parents try to negotiate their own relationship needs along with those of their children. And substance use can also result in periods of parental absence. So when maybe a parent's undertaking treatment in hospital or in rehabilitation, sometimes children can be placed into the child protection system or if a parent is imprisoned. Separation of the child and the parent without support for maintaining that parent-child relationship or that connection can cause disruption in childhood. So the other factor to consider is protective factors, and these may negate some of the impacts. So these include the individual characteristics of the child. We know things like high self-esteem, a flexible and optimistic temperament, along with other factors such as a positive parent-child relationship, or contextual factors, so having secure housing, having financial stability, and those social connections. The interrelated impacts they're really multi-layered and they're very contextual to individual families. Overall, infants and children, more than any other age group, are shaped and influenced by a range of social, biological and environmental factors. So this all goes into what makes up the whole child, and their mental health and wellbeing cannot be separated from the broader context of their lives. So many people will be familiar with this sort of systems theory around the child's ecology, which is a similar view that we think about the ecosystem in nature. So this definition here, this is from the National Strategic Framework for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's mental health and social emotional wellbeing, and it suggests that relationships are the building blocks of social emotional wellbeing, which is also what we know as child mental health. This can apply to all children, as does the view that mental health is a resource for life. It's the foundation of physical and mental health. As a resource, child mental health exists on a continuum. So most infants and children in Australia experience good mental health. They can meet challenges and express and regulate a range of emotions. They can explore their environment. They can form secure relationships, all within the context of their age and developmental stage. Mental health difficulties in infants and children might present as frequent or intense struggles with their emotions, thoughts, behaviours, or learning or relationships. They might have trouble controlling their moods or their behaviour, and find it challenging to be separated from their parent, or have problems with sleeping and eating or excessive crying, problems with engaging with school or their community. Overcompliance, a need to please, and parentification are all often signs of mental health issues that are often overlooked. So when we understand that a child's family relationship, and this includes extended family and carers, are most influential in a child's life, they're the greatest influence on a child's resilience, we recognise that the quality and stability of these relationships have a lasting impact on the child's mental health and their well-being, their confidence, their learning, and how they relate to others. So this diagram shows how interactions can shape a child's mental health outcomes, and it kind of summarises everything that I've just talked about. Vulnerabilities or adversities experienced by a parent can have a profound impact on the family and cause what we know as parenting stress. And a child might notice this. They might notice changes in their parent, their moods, their behaviours, how a parent might be parenting, and that can lead to impacts for the child. So what the child's seeing, hearing and feeling and how they make sense of their experience can have an impact on their own emotions and their behaviours and their worries or their concerns. And this can manifest in their behaviour. So when they're stressed or worried, we notice externalised behaviour with big emotions, or less easily observed, children may internalise their emotions but appear that they're thriving. So to come full circle, we know that the demands of child rearing on a vulnerable parent can in turn unsettle the nurturing environment, and this can also exacerbate a parent's own adult problems and parenting stress, and the cycle continues. So parenting stress may also have an effect on how the parent may feel that they're perceived or that they're judged. Things like shame and stigma and guilt can also create that further rippling effect, as well as what their own worries are and concerns for their child. So if we focus only on the individual adult and the people and things that wrap around and support and nurture healthy development of the child, these can be missed. So most organisations will specialise in responding to the immediate presenting adversity. So traditionally in alcohol and other drugs, service delivery is focused on the individual client, with children and families and social networks playing a marginal role in treatment. And this is certainly changing, and we're seeing a shift, and some services are undertaking the delivery of really innovative programs that shift the focus on the individual towards the adult client, towards incorporating the family unit as a whole, and this can have an immediate impact on the child and the family, and it can change that trajectory as a child journeys into adolescence and adulthood. This is also not about blaming parents for experiencing these vulnerabilities either. Adversities can occur in any family, and it's rather about understanding that parents are clearly they're instrumental in the mental health and well-being of infants and children. This is about asking, how can we support parents, which will also in turn be protective for children? How can we use strategies that focus on building their capabilities as children and families, building their resources whilst also being accountable for vulnerabilities, which are areas of a child's life that may require further attention or support. So let's hear from a parent's perspective. I've got a video with an interview for a lady called Sandra. Let's go to that now.
My husband and I used to go to, it was a combined drug and alcohol domestic violence counselling. Our eldest daughter was only 3 at the time. She used to come to those sessions with us, and she would actually sit in the room with us, and they would give her a box of toys and colour-in pencils and stuff, and she would entertain herself for most of the time. And there was a panic button in the room. It was really for the worker, but she told us that we could use it as well if we felt threatened. And one day my husband was really angry at something that they'd asked him, and he was screaming and yelling, and he was saying that he wanted to smash my face in. And my daughter was sitting under the counsellor's desk, and she was pressing the panic button, and all these workers came in the room, and the counsellor assured her peers that everything was fine. But really, everything might have been fine for her, and it might have been okay for me and my husband, but my daughter was certainly not fine. She was terrified. They never even asked me if I could see how scared she was, and they never gave me any insight as to what domestic violence was doing to her. So they just focused on us, and looking back, I just really find that astounding, because she was right there.
So I think this is not about blaming services. There's many factors that go into child-focused practice, and it's not about blaming that individual practitioner that Sandra talked about, and nor is it about blaming Sandra and her husband. But what it is about is identifying there was an opportunity there to incorporate the worries of the child, and in this instance, the child was physically visible, but her needs were invisible to all the adults in the room. And so I guess it's about recognising that there's an opportunity that we have, whether or not the child's present in the room, in adult services, with the right supports and structures and systemic supports as well. Adult services are really ideally placed to make a difference in children's lives. So using a child-focused and parent-sensitive approach when working with parents and caregivers, this recognises that the single most important factor for developing resilience in children is at least one supportive relationship with a parent, a caregiver, or another adult. And the presence of this responsive relationship with an attuned adult, this provides that safe and nurturing container within which children can practice adaptive strategies facing adversities, and this is how they generate positive experiences of coping. So in parallel to this, we know that the families, both adult and the child's relationship with the worker, is a major opportunity to build and connect a supportive environment for the child and their parent in the context of their community. And this opportunity is amplified when there are complex adult problems that can make it unpredictable and somewhat confusing for children. So research with parents with a lived experience who faced adversity, and it shows us that they can be concerned about the impact of adversity on their child. They might have worries or concerns. However, unless there's an invitation to do so, they've said that they don't always express these concerns during their interaction with a worker. And there's many reasons for this reluctance, and it might be because of shame or guilt, fear of judgment, because there might be worry around a possible child protection notification. So it really highlights the importance of incorporating effective and authentic therapeutic relationships when we're engaging with parents. So, just so we're on the same page and have a common definition, child-focused and parent-sensitive practice acknowledges and considers the experience of of a client's child and avoids these children being invisible to services. It recognises the role of those children in the client's life, even if the child never directly accesses the service. So a parent-sensitive approach, this identifies, acknowledges and validates clients who are parents, and it draws upon their parenting role as a central feature of meaning and motivation in their life. And this includes being aware of stigma and being attentive to that additional fear of judgment around parenting competence that parents may have or that they might have already experienced when accessing a service. And that can complicate the development of a trusting therapeutic relationship. So I think on the topic of stigma, we know the use of drugs and alcohol, especially illicit drugs, is a highly charged topic, and throw in the topic of parenting, well, that issue becomes especially fraught. So parents are often reduced to stereotypes of substance users, and in the light of societal expectations and ideals around parenting, there's a lot of stigma and shame attached. Stigma is also gendered, so we know that women or mothers can experience a greater sense of shame, and it's more harshly directed at women who are pregnant. Stereotypes around substance use, such as the unfit parent, they contradict gendered stereotypes such as the nurturing mother. So therefore it's really important to use an approach that is non-judgmental and non-stigmatising when talking with parents, and being particularly mindful of the experiences of women and pregnant women too. Another factor to consider when engaging with parents is trauma. Parents, like other adults who have issues with substance use, often have histories of complex trauma where they've experienced uncontrollable or overwhelming feelings of intense fear, helplessness, or a loss of control related to terrifying events. Substance use is often, we know can be a symptom of past trauma that may have occurred in childhood, such as childhood sexual abuse, fear, family or domestic violence, and sexual assault. It's really important to recognise that sometimes challenging behaviours can be related to this trauma response, and this can impact on the development of healthy relationships, including a positive parent-child relationship. So understanding trauma-informed practice is key in working with parents and retaining their engagement in treatment. In terms of trauma-informed practice, an understanding is essential when working with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families, and we're well aware of the widespread effects of colonisation and policies such as forced adoption and past family removal practices that have caused collective and intergenerational trauma for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And I think we recognise having an understanding of the ongoing effects of such traumatising practices and what they have on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So with First Nations children so disproportionately represented in child protection and juvenile justice systems and homelessness services and other services, we know that mainstream services increasingly must work effectively with parents and children who are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, their families and their communities, and must be able to do this really effectively. So this story of overrepresentation, disadvantage, it can shape how our interactions, and it can create a story that we know might be for some, but is not for all. So Emerging Minds has been working with the support and guidance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from across the whole country and numerous communities to explore how we can support mainstream services to engage with First Nations families in a way that encourages respect and cultural safety and a shared understanding. I think we've got a lot to learn from First Nations peoples. So we certainly hope to honour this voice and acknowledge the valuable and generous narratives that people have shared through an ongoing consultation process. And so with this in mind, we've developed a toolkit around engaging with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and their families, and the link's up there for you to access it. I guess overall, when partnering with parents, ensuring that the time is taken to build safety and trust in that therapeutic relationship is really key. So being empathetic and warm and transparent. This type of practice can have a lot of benefits. I've talked a lot about the impacts of children and the potential benefits for children directly, but I want to talk about how this can impact parents-to-be. So research indicates that parents-to-be aren't provided with enough information about substance use during pregnancy. So by providing that clear, non-judgmental information and support to pregnant women to stop or reduce substance use, practitioners can make a crucial difference in minimising harm to the unborn child. So in honour of Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Awareness Day this week, Emerging Minds has released a suite of resources including 5 papers, a podcast and a webinar on this topic. Exploring the benefits for a parenting role for clients who are parents, this can increase a sense of hope. It can change the belief that change is possible and that children can be a really big motivating factor for recovery and engagement in treatment, leading to better outcomes. For the practitioner, we know that parent-sensitive practice can assist in building an understanding of some of the barriers that may affect the success of a client's treatment, such as parenting stresses that can trigger relapse. It also may lead to a more honest and open relationship with clients. So now I just want to introduce a video where we're going to hear from some practitioners and researchers across Australia.
I think it's really important that practitioners are always focusing on the entire family unit, and I think from the early outset of any therapeutic intervention, if a practitioner is aware that a child is part of the family, that those conversations need to be taking place. I think it normalises, if that's something that's actually undertaken initially, it normalises that the child is always going to be part of the conversation.
Parents often come with the children front of mind when they come in and talking about substance use. It can be a really big motivating factor for them to make some positive changes in their life. Most parents, they love their kids, they want to do what's best for them, but sometimes, parents may not have the coping skills they need to do. They haven't had good role models by their own parents. They might be experiencing their own traumas, and they just don't have the skills. And what they want to be able to do is provide the safest and, best environment for their kids, but they just don't know how to do it.
When we're looking at how children adapt in families. So they typically adapt as an overfunctioner, to try and make everything good in the house. Or they may adapt and act out and to get attention, so they may be the really naughty kids of society. Or they may go into their imagination. So these are all the ways that they cope in this family. And so when they grow up and when they partner up with other people, they'll be partnering up with people where they can still be the overfunctioner. So they're typically going to be attracted to someone that doesn't do so well, so that they can do well. If they're acting out, so they're going to get into a lot of trouble, maybe into the criminal justice system. They're going to have stresses, so they're going to have to cope. And typically, how do they cope? They use substances themselves. Or when they go into their own imagination, when they create their own world, they're not really here in the world, so they become very vague and they may be forgotten, and they may have underlying mental health issues as a result of the way that they adapted to survive in their family. So we've really got to look at early interventions so that we can support families to stop this reoccurring pattern, sort of the intergenerational transmission of addiction.
The early intervention, with the parents provides them an opportunity to, gain some insight around how the impact of the substance use affects the children, but it's also an opportunity to start the conversation about how they can maybe further develop some alternative coping strategies that provides a lot healthier outcomes for the family units and, of course, the children.
I guess as well, knowing that children don't actually get to execute a voice and don't have a voice, I think it's extremely important that the practitioner actually takes on that role for the child. Not to mention the legal and mandatory reporting concerns and all of that sort of stuff that we have as practitioners as well.
Some people see it as opening a can of worms, but it's about being being able to do it in a respectful way, being able to do it in a non-judgmental way, and having a clear understanding for both the practitioner's self and also the client about why you're asking these questions. So making sure that you reference this as part of how's the family working as a whole? How do the children go? What are the routines that are happening with the kids? How maybe is the substance use impacting on the routines, and how would the parents like to see their family going?
There is a tendency in our community, in our healthcare services, particularly if there's a substance use issue, to hone in only on that issue, rather than seeing that as a symptom of a whole host of other things going on for that person. So I think there's a real opportunity for all healthcare workers and support workers in the welfare system to really think about the child as the catalyst for change.
So I guess all of those speakers spoke about how we can work with the whole family unit in a supportive and empathetic and understanding way. So I want to take a moment here to pause and to reflect on perhaps your own practice or your own place of work, your organisation, or collectively in your region around how do you work with parents, or how does your service work with parents to bring the impact of substance use into focus without adding any stigma or shame that that person may be feeling as a parent. How do you work with parents in a child-focused way where substance use may coexist with other issues such as mental health or family violence, past trauma and disadvantage? How do you work with parents to incorporate a focus on the parent-child relationship in your conversations? In 2018, Emerging Minds conducted a needs analysis with alcohol and other drug professionals and determined the major contributing factors to in a practitioner's ability to engage in this type of practice. And there were quite a range of factors, and I've only put a few up there, but clear organisational expectations regarding child-focused practicing included in frameworks or assessment protocols, practice policies or case reviews and data collection. Another factor was the ability of a practitioner to reflect on child-focused practice if this is not already core business or falls outside of core business. Another factor was access to supervision that incorporates the development of the child and the micro skills that may be involved in some of this work. With regard to those micro skills, this was around some of the other factors were the confidence and ability to build rapport with parents and have those child-focused conversations with parents who may have a long history of feeling judged or stigmatised, or may have current or previous contact with the child protection system. And I guess when there is a lack of organisational clarity around child-focused practice, practitioners discussed a lack of confidence in parent-sensitive and child-focused practice, which, I guess is quite obvious. But if you're a manager or are interested in organisational approaches, we've recently published a paper featuring 6 ways that you can support child-focused practice in adult services. So I'm going to talk about or reflect upon some of the ways that we can move towards a pathway of providing child-focused practice, some of the actions. And depending on where you are in your practice or your journey, you may be at different points. So there might be some things you're already doing, or you may be at the beginning of this journey. So I think this is really about moving beyond the individual to think about the family as a whole. It's also around assessment processes that allow for a focus on the strengths and vulnerabilities of families, considering the importance of culture. It's an opportunity to really focus on those presenting issues or crises, and also incorporating early intervention and prevention, those early actions. Incorporating a lens that understands distress in children, both whether they're externalising or the ones who are missed often, the ones who are internalising and taking on that role of parentification. And also those concurrent stresses. So this is about the child's daily lived experience and that cumulative adversity that can often build up but may not reach the threshold for an intervention. So around that duration and severity. This is also about ensuring that the lens includes a view on trauma and adversity, so those critical incidents and those cumulative experiences, including the impact on the lived experience of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their wellbeing, understanding trauma-informed care, and listening to what families say about their experiences in accessing services. So incorporating that into any sort of co-design or review of services that occurs with consumers and their families. In terms of support, it's about practice that, I guess, integrates infant and child mental health responses into their role, and as well as support for that parenting role. So these types of practices include parent-child relationships or the extended family and kinship systems. It's about promoting a warm, nurturing, confident parenting, I guess, and promoting that child relationship. Supporting parents to recognise and understand children's emotional cues, to recognise distress in children, both those big externalised and internalised emotions, and supporting parents to promote a shared emotional literacy in their family. It can be about encouraging parents to create routine and predictability in their children's lives, and we heard about that in the video. It also can be about doing family rituals, low cost, no cost activities, and that provide a means to connect. In terms of communication and meaning making, we know that in general children are very sensitive to their changes in their parents and their family members, and they're going to notice when something's not quite right, and any of the parents in the room or on the webinar will know that. But without support to understand these changes, children may misunderstand parents' moods, perceptions, symptoms, and make their own and sometimes incorrect interpretation. So it's common for children who lack an understanding of the situation to feel personally responsible. Children are egocentric in that sense, and so they may take on responsibility for feeling that they're contributing to the parent or family's circumstances, and they may blame themselves for problems in a parent's life or the life of their siblings as well. So supporting parents to communicate with their children in a way that will help them make sense of what's happening to them or their family can be a really important role that we can play in adult services. And it's also about helping build a network of supports beyond their parents. So this might be professional supports, but also natural supports, including kin and community. In response to the needs analysis, to help guide how we consider the implementation of relational work, the National Workforce Centre for Child Mental Health has developed 6 principles for effective engagement. And when you look at these words on the screen, these principles are typical engagement principles. However, each one encompasses I guess a focus on engaging with parents in conversations about their parenting role and their children's social emotional wellbeing. And they've been devised after conversations with both people with a lived experience of service delivery from research evidence and also practitioner wisdom. So you can find out more about these on our course on engaging with parents. And this uses family narratives based on people's lived experience in video form to explore the application of these principles in practice and a range of reflective questions. These principles are also incorporated in the PERCS Conversation Guide, and this is a short, semi-structured, evidence-informed psychosocial discussion tool recently developed by the National Workforce Centre, and it's based on consultation with practitioners and parents. And it supports a collaborative and respectful conversation between practitioners with parents or also pregnant women around the impact of family adversity on child's mental health. And it's specific to alcohol and other drugs. I guess it's a preventative and proactive approach that encouraged developing a shared understanding. It's not intended to be a prescriptive guide. It's something that you can incorporate into other conversations you might be having. So it's been designed so you can tailor it to your context or to the family's culture or circumstances. And it's got 4 stages in it, so it's going to assist you to recognise an opportunity to conduct a conversation about this. And it provides examples of the types of questions that you might be curious about to explore both the strengths and vulnerabilities, and it invites you to consider the support that either you can provide or it gives you links to additional resources, and it helps you to practice integrated care through making warm referrals to children's services as required. So to learn more about this, we are releasing a course hopefully at the end of this month. So if you sign up to the National Workforce Centre for Child Mental Health e-news, you will receive updates when this course is released, along with a suite of other resources. And then we've also got engaging with parents that I mentioned before as another course, or child-aware practice is another useful starting point. There is a suite of resources on our online hub. It's quite similar to Insight in that sense. We've got research highlights, practice papers, webinars, podcasts, and a range of toolkits that you can have free access to. We've also recently released an app. This is designed for parents to use, and it's a simple tool that it reflects the PERCS framework, and it helps them to reflect in how they're going in supporting their child's social emotional wellbeing and identify areas that they may want further support with to strengthen resilience in their family. And it helps them to articulate what their needs are when accessing services. So practitioners can partner with parents in using the app as well. And as I mentioned, it does align with that PERCS framework, so they match up nicely. Just a little bit on who we are, if you haven't heard of us before. The National Workforce Centre for Child Mental Health is led by Emerging Minds in partnership with 5 other organisations. It's funded by the Commonwealth Department of Health to work with state-based organisations, and it's in response to the National Mental Health Commission's recommendations for joined-up support across multiple sectors around child mental health. And we basically provide free support, tools and resources for workers and organisations around developing child mental health literacy, developing skills in engaging with adult clients or engaging with children, and providing that early intervention support. So sign up to the e-news, access the free resources, share them with your networks, and feel free to contact us because we do provide consultancy on quality improvement initiatives and implementation approaches. I think to wind it up, I guess at the beginning I asked, why is it important for all practitioners to be able to respond to issues around substance use in a child-focused way? We know that this type of practice enhances a nurturing parent relationship and supports family, kin and community connections to occur in a child's life. Through early in the life of a problem and early in your engagement with a parent. As a practitioner, your engagement with parents can support the social emotional development of children through early action, and broadening our lens to incorporate early action not only benefits infants and children in the short term, this is what creates a solid foundation for outcomes later on in life, leading to a long-term investment in the next generation. So in summary, if we truly incorporate early action and prevention into all our work across health and social services, we're going to create many opportunities to change that trajectory of vulnerable children and families, and we're also going to influence the system within which we work. So in showing this last video, I'll invite you to consider how you can make a difference in developing the whole child.
When you look at me, what do you see? My behaviour, my moods, my interactions. When you help me, what do you respond to? I am my personality. I am my attitudes. I am my family's love. I am my relationships. I am my community support. I am my past experiences. I am my strengths. I am my vulnerabilities. I am my memories. I am my everyday surroundings. I am my emotions. I am my struggle to understand. I am a child. Are you curious about these things? Do you wonder how this picture was painted? Will you see the whole of me?
Thanks for having me. Do we have questions? Is that...
Thank you, Ruby, for a pretty thorough provision of not only why we should be so child-focused, but also a lot of resources that we can access to allow us to build that into our practice.
Yeah, I think something around being mindful of accessing the resources. They are designed for a broad audience across health and social and community services. So there might be resources that speak to you more than other resources. So I'd encourage you to have a click through. It can be a little bit overwhelming though, so please don't hesitate to contact us. My email's up there if you'd like some advice around particular resources, or if you're promoting it to a team or a network. We can help you to sort of scaffold that learning pathway where you might start and how you might progress through that.
Excellent, thank you. No other questions, in which case can people just thank Ruby for such an excellent presentation.